All right. So since we have all three of us here, I'm going to bring us to order. So I'm going to call this meeting of the City Council Ordinance Committee to order, September 9th, 2021, 7 p.m. We are meeting remotely due to COVID-19 restrictions still, and which has been approved by emergency order by Charlie Baker. And good evening, gentlemen. So we have a few things on our agenda, a couple new things. Owen, I don't know if do you want to just talk about the plastic stuff real quickly first? Because you said there were some tweaks. Do you want to discuss that? And then we can move into I know we have Juneteenth on there and we have affordable housing on there. So
it's up to you, I guess. Tom, yes, but in respect of Jeff's time too, like Tom, how long do you think is the smart growth thing kind of long and complicated?
I'd say it's like medium length and medium complexity.
Okay, I'll try to run through this really quickly then. If it's up to you. I mean, I don't. Is that okay with you, Jeff?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm here for a while, so it's no big deal.
Okay. I was also going to say, like with the affordable housing stuff, we're going to have multiple meetings on that. So we don't necessarily have to do a full scale, in-depth review tonight. Like, I think if we go over it and maybe look at the finer points, then, we'll be in good shape to send it to planning board. And then, we'll have multiple meetings from there, but that's just a thought. But go ahead, Owen.
Okay, so as you know, at our August meeting, there was a discussion about single-use plastic straws and the language that we had there. And a concern was brought up by some of our members that in discussing or passing our initial language, that we did not take into consideration or appropriately engage people or groups that represented or people with disabilities. As you probably recall in the initial discussion, we did touch upon that, but I other than research that was kind of tangential, there was no real direct engagement with, again, individuals or groups that represent people with disabilities. And so I thought it was appropriate to make sure that we did the appropriate research and present the appropriate research in this regard. There were some significant concerns brought up by the council, and so I wanted to make sure that we had all the information available to us. So I'll try to be as brief as possible. I'm assuming both of you read this brief that I provided.
I did. And
okay.
Owen, real quick, 1 second before you jump into the brief. I was remiss in not asking for public speak. So I see that we have a member of the public here. I just wanted to, Matt, I don't know if you wanted to say anything that wasn't on our agenda. But I skipped over that in the beginning in my haste. So if you were here for public speak, I apologize.
I'm not here for public speak. I'm here for one of the agenda items. I think it's number 2. Thank you, though.
Yep, no problem.
Okay.
All right. Sorry about that, Owen.
Oh yeah, no problem. I apologize I didn't call it to your attention either. So briefly, there was a letter read at the August meeting that was not available to members of the council previously. So I feel like we made a decision based on the reading of that letter. I had an opportunity to both review it as well as connect with the author of that letter. And it raised some reasonable points around straw ordinances. So one is that if you ban straws outright, you're left with technologies, especially when you talk about compostable materials, that are far inferior to the current flexible plastic straws that we have available. Although I will say, just as an aside, that Shelburne Falls Coffee Roasters has some really impressive plastic-like compostable straws that you should all check out. 2, that an outright ban of straws discriminates against people with disabilities because it takes away an auxiliary aid that people with disabilities need to access services, in this case, liquids. 3, that if you're going to develop policy that affects people with disabilities, that you should engage people with disabilities in order to do them. And I agree with all 3 of those. There was a point made about disclosure of disabilities with some of these policies, and I can get to that in a little while. So essentially what I did was I prepared this brief, as you've read, that was a combination of both research as well as direct conversations. There's a lot of information out there about concerns about outright plastic straw bans as they pertain to people with disabilities, and why those are bad, which I agree with. I think the items I'd like to highlight is I contacted and had an exchange with the Massachusetts Office of Disability, who basically it's their job to identify policies that would be concerning or would create issues to access for people with disabilities. So particularly, we kind of narrowed down the 3 options when it comes to plastic straw ordinances. Those are outright bans, bans with exemptions, and I forget the term, but basically an opt-in clause where straws and request. So right off the bat, the MOD eliminated outright straw bans. They're problematic. Places that have done these have basically reverted back to at least some form of exemption or even straws and request. So that left basically a ban with exemptions where you have to explain why you require a plastic straw, or just basically non-automatic dispensing, which is essentially an opt-in or straws and request. And of the 2, I think their opinion was generally that the request on request does not in any way discriminate against people with disabilities or affect their access to services, and it's probably the better of the 2. They didn't really get into the issue of disclosure, which I know was brought up at our meeting, and really neither did any of the other people I spoke to. So the other 2 people that I conducted interviews with, one of the areas where this kind of policy seemed to have a lot of fanfare in terms of articles in Google searching was New York's policies. New York was looking to do basically an outright straw ban, and there was some voices that were from the disability community that was concerned about that. And so New York partnered with Sharon Shapiro-Lax, who's the executive director of Yad Hazakah, which is a disability group which also happens to specialize in specifically Jewish people with disabilities, but they're a well-known disability group in New York. They worked together with an environmental group and basically came up with a policy that would recommend straws on request. So it's a plastic eliminating policy. It doesn't discriminate against people with disabilities. And there was actually a really nice article, which I included in the brief, basically co-written by her and this environmental activist, that basically explains why that was the best of both worlds. And then lastly, in some of my Google searching, I came across this really wonderful article called, what's it called? I'll have to find it. By Varen Vilale, called Grasping at Straws, the Ableism of the Straw Ban. And I felt that certainly the title itself would be a great place to start to try to figure out what the issues are for people with disabilities, and how disability advocates and groups that advocate for people with disabilities would address this. And so I reached out to Ms. Villali, and we had an hour-plus Zoom conversation and kind of went over policy points and how other municipalities have dealt with this, as well as received and listened to her recommendations. And obviously, one of the biggest points she made in her article is that you can't make policy around these things, once again, without the voices of people with disabilities driving it. And so what we arrived at, and again, that's in the packet, is basically a recommendation for a policy that has plastic straws on request again, she made some really great salient points, some of which aren't 100% would be codified policy, but the one thing that we did arrive at there, which I hadn't really drafted, was basically having standardized labeling across the board in every restaurant. That's going to be the same restaurant to restaurant in terms of the signs that are displayed for straws on request. And just to go through her qualifications really quickly too, because I think it's important. She holds a Master's of Art in Social and Public Policy, and also a certificate in healthcare management. She's currently working at the Nelson Rockefeller Institute for Government. Previously worked for the Center for Disability Rights and previously the Finger Lakes Independence Center. So she has, it looks like, at least 5 years of policy making as it regards to people with disabilities. So taking all that information into account, there are also 2 legal briefs I came across, which are also cited in the brief here, basically going through all the potential policies you could look at as it pertains to single-use plastic straws and the legal ramifications behind them. So, what is the liability really of a municipality or a state that it wants to enact some sort of straw policy? And again, it was kind of parallel to what I came across in terms of conversations with disability groups and disability advocates, that straight out straw bans, while they have been implemented, are probably legally on shaky ground. Straw bans with exemptions for certain people are probably legally okay because they still allow access under ADA Title III to auxiliary aids. But again, probably the best option is, again, more of a plastic reduction option, which would be straws on request. So there's a couple legal briefs there that you can find in the works cited section. I'm just trying to look really quickly to see if I can tell you those titles. So basically, the kind of the prevailing opinion, based on speaking to disability rights activists, and as well as our own state's Office on Disability, as well as reviewing the legal framework around this, is that if a city or a state would like to enact policy around single-use plastic straws, then the options are basically either doing a ban with an exemption or an opt-in or a by request. And so I felt that in terms of ease of navigation, as well as addressing the concern that was brought up of disclosure, which again, none of the disability rights activists brought that up at all. Specifically, Ms. Vallely, we talked about that, and she said that wasn't really an issue.
On the disclosure piece, I mean, if we were doing straws by request, and anybody that wanted a straw had to ask for it, and they didn't have to say why, then I mean, there's no, right? I mean, that's the reasoning, because it doesn't seem like there's no disclosure. You're just asking for a straw.
Correct. And,
I mean, if you said, hey, when you ask for a straw, you have to tell me why, that would be different, but you don't, right? Exactly.
It's a universal opt-in. It's a universal request by anyone who wants one. I mean, and so yes, so that's a very salient point. And that's why I felt that even though from a legal perspective and also from the disability community's perspective, a ban with exemptions for people with disabilities, they felt it was actually okay. Because at the end of the day, a lot of what I was hearing was people just want access. They want to be able to have something that they need to access, in this case, liquids, goods and services, food. But it takes away kind of that layer of complication by just saying, anyone can ask for one. We're just going to put them behind the counter and with the intent of having fewer plastics. So yes, you're correct, Chairman Derby, that there's no disclosure because there's no questions asked. And so I wrote that into the policy, though, to make it really clear that if an establishment was to ask for one, that's in violation of our policy. So why don't do you want to quickly run through the language that I arrived at after?
Yeah, I mean, because like at this, I mean, I would say that you've left no stone unturned. This is obviously well researched, and you know, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And you know, so that's a good thing that it makes sense, and it's really well researched and documented. And you know, so I think that if we're at the point where we can take a look at that, the language, and then you know, you can talk. I know that you said that you wanted to add some sort of universal language to be displayed. Maybe that's the one piece that isn't complete yet. Is that correct?
I think it's in here, so I'll read it for you in a second. And yeah. You know, I'll admit that I felt pretty silly working for the last month or so on plastic straws until I had the opportunity to talk to the legislative director for the city councilor in New York who did their straw policy. And I mean, you want to talk about deliberations over like a single piece of minutia of plastic straws. So I don't feel as silly anymore. So I'll just read the language that I recommended that we add. So one, no retail food establishment shall dispense, distribute, or sell a beverage straw in conjunction with the sale or service of prepared food, except upon request of an individual. If a food establishment that provides straws, and that should probably say plastic beverage straw, sorry. Oh, no, beverage straw, sorry. It should say beverage straw, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. If a food establishment that provides straws upon request also provides self-serve single-use items for food consumption, such as utensils, napkins, or cup lids, it should post a printed sign reading, straws are available upon request in any areas where these single-use items are provided, as well as clearly displayed at the place where the food is ordered. And here you go, Councilor Derby. Signage shall be developed in consultation with the Board of Health to maintain consistent legibility and messaging across all businesses in the city. 2, all food service establishments shall maintain a sufficient supply of single-use plastic beverage straws that are not compostable, as well as a sufficient supply of compostable straws. If a person specifically requests a plastic beverage straw, such food service establishment shall provide a single-use plastic beverage straw that is not compostable free of charge and shall make no inquiry into the reason for such request. Nothing in this article prohibits retail food establishment and their employees from prompting patrons to request straws as described in item 1 above. And the reason I put that in there is that someone said, well, maybe we should make it policy that the staff just ask people. And I wanted to combine both ideas so that we, again, left no stone unturned. People could still request it, but we could also kind of train staff to let people know what the policy is. I accidentally have 2 number 3s. Nothing in this article prohibits customers from using their own straws of any material for personal use in any business establishment. So bring your own if you can. And then any violation of the section is punishable as detailed in section 6/21.4.3, which is just our enforcement section for the ordinance.
Sounds good to me. I mean, I think it's complete, and I'm happy to move forward with it if Tom feels comfortable.
I mean, my only thing is, like, this sounds sensible to me. What I thought is that last time we had this debate, a lot of information, a lot of viewpoints got introduced in a setting that was not super helpful for that conversation. So there's a part of me that would wonder if it wouldn't make sense to carry this forward another meeting and invite some of those folks to talk here so that if they have opposing opinions, we can hash that out in a committee setting versus another public hearing, which I think this is just it's a complex issue. And when you have a bunch of people reacting to new information in a setting where there's 9 of us, and then, you've got folks from the city jumping in, you've got the public jumping in. I just thought I felt like there was a big communication breakdown, and I don't know where you guys are on this, but there's a part of me that would think, like, would it make sense to just be like, okay, Councilor Zaret came up with something that seems pretty sensible to us. Would folks from the Commission on Disability or councilors who felt strongly about this like to come and have a conversation about this before we bring it forward to a public hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I hear that. also, on the flip side of that, I think it was pretty widely known that we were going to discuss it at this meeting too. I mean, you know, I think it was talked about that it was coming back to committee and that we were gonna, and there was a lot of emails. But that being said, I'm not going to completely discount that point. But I'll let Councilor Zaret respond. Go ahead.
So I'm always open to conversation, and I will agree with you, Councilor Peak. I think the way that this was presented at the last meeting, well, potentially well intended by some, there was a inability to either receive and then synthesize information that was being presented. And to speak to what I was saying about New York before, like presenting something like this as an amendment when we have 10 minutes to kind of discuss it and no one knew about it, the clerk hadn't received information. I agree. So I feel two ways about this. I feel one, if you feel that it's best to have a full-throated conversation and really make an effort to make sure that everyone can discuss this at the committee level. Absolutely. I will say too that, and Councilor Derby's aware of this, so I forwarded this to the Commission on Disability and requested them to discuss it. And Councilor Derby, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of the answer I got back was, we're not sure if we will.
It seemed like they might not have had time to discuss it.
Yeah.
So I mean, and that's another reason why, you know, maybe delaying this, you know, until a further meeting, just to give them that time, which I think is fine. You know, but the pragmatist in me, you know, wants to be like after I read the brief and synthesized that information, there's no salient argument against a straw and request policy. I mean, there just isn't. I mean, you could make one, but it wouldn't be salient. So, you know, so I mean, that's kind of where I'm coming from. It's like, but I'm happy to keep this going. I'm happy to keep it going.
And I'm happy to have a conversation too. I did invite, as you know, Councilor Derby, I did invite the COD to come tonight. They were notified about this meeting. So Councilor Peak, absolutely. I mean, I don't have an issue with that. I'm in no rush other than, so just as a more global thing, you know, we have this January 1st deadline of the whole ordinance going into effect. And then I guess it's an agenda item, so I could talk about this. I met with the Board of Health last night, and there was some language, even so the language that we just amended, they want us to amend it more. So the deferment process, there was some language in there that they wanted us to change. And I understood actually what they were saying was that even as they said it could potentially be arbitrary and capricious. And so there's some enforcement language that they use that they preferred that we use. So the bottom line is they're putting something together. I said, okay, well, we're kind of working on a deadline here. So they're going to put together some language so I can submit it for the next council packet, just so it can be public, public record. And then we're going to have to discuss that anyways. And I figured that we'd probably want to set the public hearing for this stuff on the same day. So maybe if you think, I mean, taking into account, I think Councilor Peak's very reasonable request, and Councilor Derby, the fact that we're going to want to combine these items, I don't have a problem, you know, waiting. I'd like to try to get this to a public hearing by November, just because of time.
I think that sounds like a reasonable course of action. So that way we can envelop the new information and we can bring these together as a package. I think, and plus that gives people time to review and to really review the material to show that a straw by request policy is, you know, a perfectly acceptable course of action. So I'm fine with that. Let's put this one aside, and when we discuss those amendments, we'll bring them forward together. So I'm good with that.
Hey, Councilor Peak,
plus public hearings that way, so that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Councilor Zaret, what did you say?
I apologize. I interrupted you. I was just going to say, did you have any questions about any of this at all?
Not at this time.
Okay. I did also, just for full transparency, I circled back with Erin Vallely after I wrote this, and I showed her, because I wanted to make sure that I was representing her point of view accurately and not just kind of taking information and making it seem like I was, manipulating it to fit the policy I was recommending. So she's reviewed the whole brief, including how I cite, obviously, which cites her, and she had no concerns. So I just wanted people to know that. So
Sounds good to me.
All right. So okay, great.
All right, so let's so we'll pick this back up again. And thanks for all that information and the brief. A lot of work there. So let's move to affordable housing. How about that? And Matt, is that what you're here for, the affordable housing piece?
I am.
Okay, very good. All right, so Tom, you want to give this a little introduction for us?
Yeah, sure. I think I opened this up. Nope, I didn't. Okay. So there's actually a couple things here. And I apologize. I thought I got this all queued up ahead of time. And no, I guess it's not. Well, I'll just start verbally.
Do you want me to let you screen share? Do you want me to make you co-host?
That'd be great, but my thing isn't loading, so it's kind of a moot point right now. Miracles of technology. Okay. There's really, there's a couple, I don't know. My computer is melting down. Here we are. Okay, great. There's really a couple of things here. So the first thing is about the smart growth district. The proposal, as we introduced it, would increase, would add an adjacent parcel, that being one of the schools, to the smart growth district, which would allow us to, if somebody wanted to redevelop that school for affordable housing, they'd be able to use that. I also think this would be a fine time, if there are other changes to the smart growth district, to examine those, because if I'm not mistaken, I spoke with Jeff briefly about this. I think that when we make a change to that overlay district, it has to go to the state for approval. So we haven't done that in a long time. So if there's other places, we're going to have to change it for this one parcel, but it could be worth taking a look at. The other thing is we made a couple changes to the smart growth district. So the really key changes here, or we're proposing, I'm sorry, I say we made as if we already did it. That's very rude. So the big changes are, so right now there's a requirement that housing has a certain amount of affordable units, like regardless if it uses the smart growth, regardless of the size. We are instead going to be making it so that only applies to units over a certain size, because I believe that size is 4, because right now if you had like a duplex, you'd have to have one of them be affordable, and that just might not work with certain projects. There might be things where you could get 2 market rate units above a shop, and instead you're getting none. Obviously people are putting up like a big development. We want affordable units, but that there you don't want to hold back these sort of small projects that could get us a couple units here or there. And then on the flip side, right now our smart growth district actually prevents us from having a development that is 100% affordable. So that's sort of the trade-off. Is we're going to allow, we're proposing that we would allow some small projects that aren't affordable, but it's units. And in exchange, we're also allowing for a larger project, if one of the larger like affordable housing agencies wanted to come in and do something with the smart growth, we're allowing them to do something that is 100% affordable. So that's that. And then the other one is it's around planned residential developments with affordable housing. So planned residential developments is the zoning type that's sort of like the planned commercial developments that we talked about during the cannabis zoning thing, where you have kind of like a bunch of different units on one property all done at once, but it's for residential. So you might have a parcel that has a couple houses and some multifamily all kind of mixed in. One way that this came up is I was chatting with Jeff because on one of the sort of the kind of stuff that I get into and talking about city planning and housing and economic development and whatnot. Someone was showing, these pictures of like this little, what they were calling like a tiny home village. And it was like a half-acre lot that someone put 6 or 8 small housing units on around like a communal garden. And it was beautiful. I thought it just looked like a great use of space. And you got to figure there's plenty of lots like that still in Easthampton. So I was like, how would we even zone something like this? And he said, well, it would probably be with this thing that we've never really used. So the idea is this is basically the exact same plan as what we did with the multifamily with affordable housing, where we're saying that we will allow this by plan approval instead of special permit, and that we will relax the parking minimums in exchange for a certain share of those units being affordable to folks under a certain income threshold. So those are sort of the two things being brought forward. I don't know if you'd prefer to start talking about one or the other, but I finally do have the thing up so I can share the zoning.
I think maybe if we start with the map of the overlay district. I don't know if you have that, but I think because I remember when we first did 40R, when we were originally looking at it, there were some parcels that kind of were on the cusp and we left them out. And so I'd be interested to relook at that again. I mean, it's been a while.
Yeah, I can probably get it up pretty quick.
And I was wondering if we were going to address parking too, since we had done it with the last housing amendment, because this one had I feel like it had similar parking restrictions. So I was wondering if we were going to look at that as well. So I'm glad to hear that that's going to be part of it.
Yeah. Well, our map is a little bit tricky because of just all the different stuff going on, but I will share it. And
Jeff, do you have one that
I've got it up?
Okay.
Here.
Was this in the August packet?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the August 4th packet.
Okay, that's why I can't find it. Okay.
So anyone, 1 in 4 men suffers from color blindness. So someone here's out of luck. But the yellow vertical stripes that you can see right here are the smart growth district.
Yep. I remember it being downtown and neighborhood business area, like on the edge of the neighborhood business and mill industrial. Okay. Yeah, that's.
And I'll just jump in too real quick. In the green blob on the right side where it says R10, there's 2 yellow areas that's just top of Briggs Street right there. There's 2 yellow areas, and then to the right of that R10, I think it's basically the end of Briggs Street, is that black vertical striped, and so that was a neighborhood smart growth overlay. So that it was broken up. Salem, I think, as you described.
Yeah.
And there was an email that was submitted. I think Matt is here to address the email, but there was a request to consider other parcels. When it comes to that, there's another map that I was able to dig up that the request is for a parcel on Northampton Street on Highway Business. And that was originally part of the proposal. I was doing research. I think the email came through yesterday or the day before. And so in 2009, when it was sent to DHCD, there was parcels on Northampton Street included, and it came back approved by DHCD, but it didn't it didn't make it to the final, packet that went through city council process. I mean, I don't exactly know why yet, but that area was originally considered it was considered for the same designation.
I could be wrong, but I think I think part of that might have been there was a counselor that lived in that area that felt like it wasn't appropriate for that neighborhood off of Northampton Street. I think that might have been one of the reasons why it came off, but I could be wrong. Now, hold on, Jeff. One of the other spots that I was thinking of, because I mean, Highway Business, Northampton Street was definitely. I mean, that was one that we had originally talked about. There was another one off of by the border of Southampton on Route 10 on the left-hand side. It's a large parcel next to the dance studio, I think is. Is it industrial maybe?
If you see,
This area is industrial.
Yeah.
It's the, on that map that's showing now, it's not the NB, it's kind of deceiving because it's that green color. And I think that's R35. So if you look, if you're going down, if you're looking on the left side of the page, you can see the purple HB. That's the very end. That's actually like the big Y. I think that's the big Y area there. Right. And you can see the area marked as R15 is blue. And then to the right of that is green. And you can see like that marked out like cul-de-sac. Yep. That's the parcel that I think you're talking about. So
no, I'm talking about across the street.
Okay.
I think it has a telecom overlay, but it's marked in I.
Yeah.
It's gray.
Yeah, it's across the street, right? Yeah.
I know it has a telecom overlay, which I don't even remember what that means or what that does, but I mean, it seems like that could potentially be, because I know that there's a couple of large parcels there. So I just a thought.
Okay. Yeah. I think this is worthy of discussion. Matt, I think, is here to speak to that a little bit too about the other. So do you want to hear the member of the public first, and then we can kind of see where that goes from there?
That sounds good.
Okay.
That sounds good. Matt, we'd love to hear from you.
So yeah, we had a brief meeting with Jeff earlier last week, and we've been working with the Courtneys, who are the owners of the property that's known as the Tasty Top property. I think that the Ordinance Committee and the council are probably very familiar with that parcel. But in discussing with Mr. Courtney, what we believe is a proper use would be for housing, and it would be higher density housing. And in talking with the engineer, we're using Rob Lebec right now. Rob brought our attention to the 40R and thought that it would be a very good use for that area as a whole. It kind of really checks all the boxes for 40R. That being said, we've discussed it with Mr. Courtney. Mr. Courtney and I had worked on a quick draft of an email that we sent off to Jeff, and Mr. Courtney is on board with that type of use for that property, and is really requesting that if this is going to be considered by the council sometime in the near future with regard to changing or amending the 40R, that perhaps it's a good time to consider additional areas for 40R. The areas that are currently zoned that are kind of already saturated with property, and by property I mean they're already developed. The areas that we're looking at is undeveloped land, or predominantly undeveloped land. So this would be new housing stock that would be brought to Easthampton. We think that it's a good location for that. We believe that the 40R overlay would be a good fit for that area. And we would ask that property be included, and perhaps even more properties in that area. There's some larger parcels there that are still suitable for development and would add to the housing stock for Easthampton.
Okay, thank you. Now, Councilor Zare, I see your hand.
So I'm just trying to sorry, I apologize. So which part of this map is the overlay that we're talking about? I probably should have asked this earlier. I just kind of got lost a little bit.
It's the part with the yellow vertical lines.
Okay, this in the kind of in the middle here. Okay.
Yeah, and down business, and it goes through, you know, up to Adams, and there's a couple, you know, little spots of it, and you know, around the between Everett and Briggs Street. What we're definitely, I mean, what me and Jeff were initially talking about was, I think, oh, these things are so dense. You know, right in here, where you have Center and Pepin, would be including those. But while we're here, you know, if there's a property owner who'd like to see this smart growth apply to their parcel, I really don't see any reason why it would be improper to discuss that. Sorry, I see Jeff has his hand up.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Sorry, I was getting lost in my screens. I don't know if it'd be helpful. I pulled up the GIS layer, and I think I can strip it down. Do you want me to? Because I think it'll be a little bit easier to see where the existing district is. Let
me make you co-host. Hold on.
Okay.
All right, you should be.
I should have thought of that.
It was good. I think this one will be clear because I think I think I'm able to strip away the other zoning. So this is the yellow is we have two overlay districts in the smart growth. One is called the downtown district, and then there's the neighborhood smart growth. And so the neighborhood one is the black vertical, and then the downtown one are the yellow vertical bars.
And what's the difference between those?
If you look through, and it's in the packet, if you look through the table of uses that's associated with it, that's where I think there's differences. I would just say, generally speaking, the neighborhood is going to be a lower density and probably lower intensity uses, whereas the yellow is the downtown, and so that was really promoting mixed uses and the higher residential density.
And I could be wrong, but I feel like when we did that, we looked at a higher standard of design standards. Like
that could be, yes.
Yeah, like street lights and stuff were included and that type of thing.
Yep. And then for purposes of just quick, if you don't mind, for the purposes of the first amendment that is in the packet for August 4th, if you look here, I don't know, I'm assuming my cursor is moving, but yeah, over here on Chapel, so that's Maple Street School. And so the entire property is in the smart growth overlay. And what it came up when we were doing the downtown strategic plan was when it was really kind of identified that, I'll zoom in a little bit more, but when the boundaries were set in 2009, now my computer's going really slow, center school was included, but Pepin, for I don't know if it was intentional or unintentional, and now it's not going to show, but because there's Clark Ave cuts through both of the properties, and Pepin was kind of left off, and so that was the first initial amendment, was to pull the overlay over onto Pepin School. And I did have an email communication with DHCD that kind of boundary amendment where it's just one parcel and it's adjacent would probably be minor and wouldn't require the full review by them. That is just to say that I had been scoping that as kind of a minor change. This idea of adding other parcels, I think it was already suggested, is that we might need to talk or reach out to the land. I don't know why it's not zooming in. I apologize. I thought it would zoom in a little bit, but at this level, you can see how the Pepin building is here.
Yeah, we can see fine on that level.
Okay. That looking at other parcels, just I think a couple things we might want to do. So here we have Matt kind of representing one property owner, which I think is good. If we can do some analysis and look at other parcels, but we probably should reach out to those property owners, the owners affected, to make sure that they're, I guess, interested. That would be my only thought at the moment.
Okay.
So I'll stop this.
No, I think that's good. Owen, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just kind of like, so going off a little bit of the map there, now I have a better understanding. And then what Matt said. Actually, Matt, can I have your last name just for the
Sure, it's Donahue, Donohue.
So I think what Matt is saying makes sense. My question is, does it make sense in the context of this discussion? In other words, the smart growth zone that we're talking about is really downtown business. And does this kind of evoke the need to have a broader discussion about other smart growth zones, such as the ones that were outlined in the housing production plan, which didn't specifically include the Courtney property, but I think in spirit did, because it kind of included these large parcels. Like there's one kind of down almost near Big Y, I think, and a few others kind of in highway business zones. So I guess I'm making more of a statement than a question, but I guess the question is, in the spirit of this specific language, we're talking more, I guess, so Jeff, this is a question to you. We're talking more of kind of a downtown smart growth overlay here, correct?
Currently, we currently have, that's the name by title. Yep. And so if you looked at the map, it goes through to the downtown. It also goes out to the Mill District. So we have to have some discussion of how this would fit, whether we need to create a new overlay of some sort, or whether we would want to look at whether stretching the downtown, just putting the downtown label, and that could be possible, is to take those yellow bars and put it over. But we need to talk about whether there would be other design or density, criteria. Generally speaking, I'm okay with this. The thing I would want to watch unfold is looking at the last kind of set of amendments that we did. Not the cannabis one, it took like 9 months. It's kind of like the long haul. At some point, if we look like we're going for a long haul, I might want to carve off the school, because there is by like January or February, we want to have the school. Ideally, we want to have the school rezoned. And then if this one is different or taking longer, then maybe we separate them then. But I'm okay with kind of slowing down a little bit to see if this bigger picture makes sense now. So in terms of process, I'm very open to it, as long as at some point, we might need to make a decision whether we push one ahead of the other or not. So sorry, I'm not sure if that was what you're asking, but that was my.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think we're having the same conversation, but I think ultimately the zoning application is slightly different when we're looking at like a downtown smart growth application, like more of a like housing expansion overlay in areas that are like adjacent to, like, for instance, the highway business district. So I'm in favor. I just want to make sure that, like, in terms of our nomenclature application, because the kind of overlay that Matt's talking about, like over the Courtney property, might almost kind of have slightly different ramifications and details. But I just wanted to put those thoughts out there.
If I might, I don't know if I can comment again, but I might add something.
Can you just hold on 1 second?
Sure.
I'm gonna have Councilor Peak. He had his hand raised.
Sorry.
So I have him, and that's no problem. Then you can go right after him.
Yep.
Go ahead, Tom.
Right. So I'm trying to get my head around sort of what the scope is here, so that we can just define the questions we're asking clearly. And it seems like, there is a question about, do we want to consider other parcels? My view is there's really no reason why we shouldn't. But if it turned out that this was going to turn into a huge scope creep thing, then I agree that we don't want to slow down the school thing. I don't know if it necessarily needs to be. We could just, I don't think if you look at, there's already just sort of little islands of this zoning throughout the city. So it's not like this would be unprecedented to just say, oh, and sure, let's do this parcel too. We could also look at more broadly, like, is that part of Northampton Street? Does that part of Northampton Street just kind of fit for this? I mean, it is walkable to a number of amenities, and it's got bus service, and maybe we just decide that part of Northampton Street is good. Maybe there's some other parts. In response to what Councilor Zaret was saying, I think that one thing that we kind of maybe need to wrap our heads around a little bit better, and I think I have an okay sense of this, but maybe not as good of sense if I wanted as, like, okay, we're calling this we called this the downtown smart growth overlay district, but are the actual use types that it's allowing unacceptable outside of the downtown? Is there something about them? Is there things that are being allowed there that we wouldn't want to see in the highway business district, or for that matter, in the stretch of land going from the downtown to the highway business district? And if so, is, what would be, not in terms of the neighborhood, like what's that going to look like? I think that's sort of an issue that we need to just sort of, I feel like I need to wrap my head better around in order to, but I like nothing in the district that I'm aware of immediately jumps out as something that I think was wildly inappropriate in the highway business district, perhaps in other parts of the city, but I mean, it's already a heavily commercial area with a good deal of multifamily housing in the near vicinity. So I don't want us to get too hung up on that name unless somebody has like a real thing there that they're like really concerned about in terms of that sort of use being allowed.
So I'm gonna jump in. I think that was a good comment, Tom. And I would say, as being part of the process from when we first did this, that the downtown name had nothing to do with necessarily the specifics of it applying to downtown business zoning. It was more that was the area where it was concentrated. And if you look at it, one of the issues that I've had with this, and I had from the beginning, was like a lot of the places that were included in the overlay were already built and already, and so there wasn't a lot of options there. So I think that's all the points you made are important. And what I'll do is I'll jump, Matt, go ahead and comment, and then Owen, I see your hand up, so I'll have you go after that.
My comment is kind of in keeping with what Tom is saying. Is my read of it isn't. It's not inconsistent with what the underlying reason for the district is. And I think that you might be able to accomplish some of the goals through differentiating the parcels that are in the downtown area based on their size. They're limited in size already. So once you get to a certain size, you might be able to differentiate some of your planning approvals by the size of the lot that is getting developed for the 40R. Jeff, does that make sense to you? I'm saying instead of recreating the wheel for a new 40R zone that is going to be called Business Highway 40R, that you just amend the 40R and you differentiate between smaller existing or smaller lot sizes and the larger lot sizes that could be planned for your community. Does that make sense to anybody? I don't know if I made sense.
It makes sense to me, and that's kind of where I was going. And Jeff, before I get to you, which I do want your response to that, I did tell Owen that he could go next. So,
thank you, Chairman. No, I think Councilor Peak, I think you helped help me like kind of understand this better. And I think, especially when we think of downtown, like we're really talking about walkability and accessibility in terms of parcels. And so like, it doesn't mean necessarily like Cottage Union Street. It means like these other spaces, like for instance, the Courtney parcel that is pretty accessible to the core of Easthampton. So the only thing I would ask of this body is to really make sure that we're vetting like all the parcels that meet that criteria, and that we're kind of, we pan out in terms of making sure that we don't like focus in just on one parcel and to make sure that we're really looking at any other thing that meets its criteria. So I don't have a problem with kind of using it, the downtown business as an overlay, as an overarching term that really implies more of the functionality and the zoning application we're trying to put in place here. So, and I do like the idea that Matt has, that, you know, different sizes or occupations of parcels might have different kind of requirements. But I'm just, I'm curious to hear what our esteemed planner has to say about that.
And Jeff, before, but real quick, I just wanted to say, I think, you know, if we're gonna open this up, which I think, I mean, this is about 40R, right? And if I think it makes sense to look, since its inception, what was 2009 or whatever, it hasn't really been used. So I think it's time to look at other parcels. So that's why I think the one on the Southampton side makes sense. I think the Courtney property makes sense. I think the one next to McDonald's makes sense. I think the one next to River Valley Market, like all of the parcels that potentially could be, you know, catching areas for this use, I think should be fair game. So and Jeff, I will now let you speak. Sorry.
No, you don't need to apologize. It's good. It's a really good discussion. And I think this is a really, so just remembering that the packet, you know, we need to do some logistic, you know, we just need to assess this, but the packet that Tom and I kind of talked about was changing some of the requirements and then adding PEP in. But now it is a good time to do this kind of panning out and look. I only had, like, you know, there was an email that Matt sent, and I think, Salem, I tried to forward it to you to just get this ball rolling. I think it was yesterday. So, you know, this is really kind of just new. I think it's kind of a natural, hopefully it's natural to say we'll continue this ordinance meeting to another date. So I need to gather a little bit, but the good news is that I did find something. I found it this morning. It's somewhere between what was just said, and I think it just will give us a little bit of a launching place, like a place to go. But it seems to show that, I'll pull it up. This is a packet. I will say that the former city planner, the first city planner we had, was great, did amazing things, but record keeping was a little bit of a challenge. So this is just titled Mayor's Packet from 2008. That's kind of like, well, there you go. There's no date in it. But this was the map I was just fiddling around with as we were talking. And at the bottom, the key shows downtown mixed use. Then it shows highway corridor mixed use and traditional neighborhood village. And so what we ended up with was the downtown mixed use and the traditional neighborhood village. So I think to make this work and for the discussions, maybe it is this idea of creating a highway corridor mixed use. I have to believe that there was a corresponding zoning document with this, but I haven't found that yet, but I did find the map. So what this shows up here is the first few parcels. If you're going, I guess this is really hard to geographically define, but if you're leaving town on Route 10, all the parcels on the right side of Northampton Street, half of them are the Courtney parcels. Then the other half on the top here are the ones I think Salem said next to McDonald's. And then across the street are some of the Cernak parcels, which we know are vacant and being advertised for sale. So there is this kind of real natural, you know, tendency for us to want to look back at least this, and then maybe it's a couple other parcels and see what we get. But I feel pretty good about using this as a launching pad. There were some calculations attached to this. This map shows substantially developed is yellow, developable is purple, and underutilized is orange. And that kind of goes to some of this discussion that a lot of this purple, you know, that might be where we want to look at actually getting new housing units. Then I'm going to skim through this, but this is a chart that I think this is the kind of information that we'll have to vet again. And this is the type of information that would go back to DHCD when we're considering this. But this first set of highway corridor mixed use subdistrict includes these Northampton Street parcels by parcel ID. And it's about 22 acres. That was that that highway business area that was shown on another map. And then we already have this traditional neighborhood village in the downtown, which was approved. So I was just kind of getting my hands on this stuff this morning. I think I want to repackage it up and get it to the committee, and I think that kind of gives us this direction to go to kind of vet some additional parcels. So I'll stop because they still out of hands.
I saw Tom's hand first, sorry. And then Owen.
So I think it's really cool that like this was already a proposal, right? And it's a proposal that makes sense to me. So I guess, yeah, I mean, that maybe what I was going to propose, just because I could see this conversation becoming circular pretty quick, is since I introduced this, with the permission of the committee, what I'd like to do is, we can finish what we have to say here, but then continue this to the next meeting. I will meet with Jeff at some point between now and the next meeting, and sort of go over what's in our current downtown scheme and what we'd want to be different in a highway mixed use smart growth district. And then sort of if they're like generally like I think I need to look at the DHCD standards about what what smart growth districts should be like, and whether we want to, if there's any other areas that we want to consider. I feel very safe, honestly, if planners already proposed this, and it just at the time it didn't really fly because there was some, maybe there was an objection from a certain counselor, but I have no problem. Like personally, I think that's a good idea. We have very little developable land, and I'd like to see it developed smartly. And I'd like to see it developed in a way that provides the kind of housing that we actually want. So I have no problem moving that forward. And then if there's anything additional that we want to look at, that's fine. But I think that's like that the fact that there's already been a district there and that it's laid out in a way that still kind of makes sense from a development perspective really kind of does away with for me, like any kind of like spot zoning concerns that I would have. So I'd be comfortable just meeting with Jeff and coming up with a proposal and bringing it back to the council, and just sort of to amend my initial recommendation to include some additional parcels with like an actually thought through rationale for why those parcels are potentially included. Does that sort of work?
It sounds good to me. Owen, I know that you had your hand up, so if you want to.
Yeah, first of all, I like that. And second of all, I'd like to echo what Councillor Peak said, that we're kind of fulfilling a mission that was set forth a while ago. I mean, I know that Councillor Peak and I talked about this with the housing production plan, that we had the previous one that had many of the previous items on it, and I really feel like we're using with some really good momentum and political will here to kind of move forward on making good on in the intentions of the some of the legislators and such that came before us. So I guess my only question to think about is there something substantially different about these mostly empty parcels that are like in the highway business district compared to like a downtown application where you might want to have somewhat different language, potentially even more flexible because we're trying to encourage density. And I also agree too, the way that parcel map was drawn out, I liked it because it was basically a generalized region of the city. It wasn't just one parcel. And so that kind of fulfills my only concern, that we're just looking at parcel types as opposed to saying, hey, we really want to do something here. Let's zone around this. So I like it. And so good ideas.
Sounds good. So I think that's a good, I mean, Jeff, unless you want to add anything, I think that's a good place for us to put this one on the side burner while Tom, you take the lead on that and work with Jeff to see if you can bring us back something. And that way we can continue to move forward. So that sounds good to me. Perfect.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, great. So next meeting, are you guys, is that okay if I throw out a date? I know that we have the Juneteenth thing. But now that we're fresh, I feel like I want to be able to give the EDIC a date. I kind of tossed out the 28th potentially. So I just wanted to see if you guys could look at that, because then if we met with the EDIC, then potentially we could do that for the first part of the meeting, and then we could pick this up on the second part.
EDIC might be interested in this conversation.
And they might be interested in this as well. So
can't hurt. All right, let me see.
September 28th is a Tuesday. And if that doesn't work, that whole week is relatively, it seems like it's.
I think that works. I know
it's great for me.
Okay.
Let me just double check one thing really quickly.
Yep.
I know you didn't necessarily ask for my availability. I think it worked for me, but a little bit later, like the 7 o'clock start time, I know is hard, but that will help me. I think I could commit to like joining at 7-ish. If you did it earlier and had other items, that would be fine with me too. But 7's good. I'm coaching my daughter's soccer team, and we have Tuesday night practices. But I think by 7-ish, like that would be fine for me. Just 2 cents.
Perfect. I'll take those 2 cents, cash them in.
A little later is actually good for me too sometimes. As far as I could tell, that works for me. I don't see anything else that for some reason that date's jumping out of my head, but I don't have anything written down here.
Do you want me to schedule it for 6:30 for EDIC, and then Jeff can come in at 7, and if they are interested, they can stay. And so we'll pick this back up at we'll meet at 6:30, but we'll pick this particular issue back up at around 7 for the next one. All right, that sounds perfect. So I'll do that. Now Juneteenth. So that's a resolution. Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, yep. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Take care. So on the Juneteenth resolution, the reason it came to us is because we have to amend the holidays. And is that it? Or are we looking at the resolution as well?
I think that was kind of like probably similar logic to the discussion about that we had in council about why the acquisition of the land on Reservation Road got sent to finance and not property. I think it's a similar topic. That was my guess. Is that? Okay. I mean, yeah. What do you,
and is that something you guys want to take up tonight, or do you want to save that for a? I'm in no rush. I just it's not. Frankly, I just wanted to get it in there. There's frankly probably more pressing things. I guess as a sponsor, I was redoing the holiday language to include it, and then I thought that because of the gravity of this specific holiday, I thought it was very important to include. Even though it's a national holiday, I thought it was important for our city to affirm the origins of this, and so. It's September, so we don't, I'm in no rush. I just, definitely want to get it done before June.
Yeah, I don't care. I just wanted to make it. It's one of those things that, I did it and I wanted to get off my plate. We could talk about whenever, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if Council feels strongly anyway, but
yeah, Tom, I don't know if you have any, I feel like, maybe if we pick it up, maybe not at the next meeting, but the meeting after.
Sure.
Yeah, and totally fine with me.
And that way we can, we don't have to have a marathon tonight, and everybody can get some rest.
Yeah, I mean, I think Councilor Peak's zoning ordinance, the zoning amendments are very important, and obviously with a deadline. with the single-use plastic stuff. So,
Right.
yeah.
I thought you were saying like Councilor Peak zoning out. That was
No, I'm not okay.
It might have both been true.
I mean, like, yeah. So anyway, so all right, that sounds great. So I have us for September 28th at 6:30, and I'm going to invite the EDIC, and then we can pick up, see where we've gotten with the 40R stuff, and we can again. I mean, I think for the plastic stuff, if we can get people to come to that meeting, I'm happy to like even have them give comment. I don't think that should take a super long time, but I would like to make space for that for sure. So, so let's shoot for 6:30 on the 28th, and unless you guys have anything else to add, I'm ready to go zone out.
I'm fine with that.
All right, cool. Yeah, I apologize. It's been a long day.
Oh, did you guys get the minutes I sent?
That's a good question. I don't think.
You know what? Why don't we? I have a bunch of minutes I need to submit. We can just talk about it next meeting.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Perfect. Awesome. I would take a motion to adjourn if you all feel comfortable.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Let's go with Councilor Peak.
Aye.
Councilor Zarek.
Yes.
And I vote yes too. Good evening, everybody. Everybody have a good one. Take care.
See ya.